On the page, it looked nothing. The beginning simple, almost comic. Just a pulse, bassoons, basset horns, like a rusty squeeze box. And then, suddenly, high above it, an oboe. A single note hanging there, unwavering. Until a clarinet took it over. Sweetened it into a phrase of such delight. This was no composition by a performing monkey. This was a music I'd never heard. Filled with such longing, such unfulfillable longing. It seemed to me that I was hearing the voice of God. Excuse me. But why? Why would God choose an obscene child to be his instrument? It was not to be believed. This piece had to be an accident. But had to be. It better be.
Hello, and welcome to episode 3.19, the June 12th, 2024, Bach and Beyond 2024 Part 2 edition of Notes from the Aisle Seat, the podcast that covers the arts in northern Chautauqua County, sponsored by the 1891 Fredonia Opera House. My name is Tom Laughlin, and I'm your host as we bring you news and information about arts events at the Opera House and around the region, including interviews with artists and creators across the county. Well, it had to happen sooner or later. Perhaps it's the long June days, or my grass pollen allergy, or just that little bit of extra warmth we've been experiencing. Maybe it's just the forgetful haze that June seems to bring with it. Or maybe it's just the continuing loss of brain cells. Whatever the reason, I got my dates wrong in my head. In my haste to get this podcast prepared in advance of a week-long trip I'm taking during the second week of June, I failed to see that this episode, scheduled for June 12th, would be released after the two Bach and Beyond movies have been screened. In my head, I thought they were scheduled for Thursday, June 13th, prior to Friday's first concert. Alas, they were screened on June 8th, and this wonderful interview I recorded with movie guy Paul Preston is regrettably out of date. So, my apologies to my listeners, and especially to Paul, who took the trouble to dig up these movies and see them for this interview. Despite its untimeliness, however, the interview is certainly worth a listen, and both movies are available for streaming. So, let's hear what Paul has to say about them. Well, we do have a very unusual aspect to this coming Bach and Beyond Festival at the 1891 Opera House, and that is the addition of two movies that happen to be about Baroque composers, Mozart and the Chevalier de Saint-Georges, who is also known as Joseph Boulogne. That's his real name. And you know, whenever I think about movies, there's only one person I think of. That's Paul Preston from the Movie Guys. So I managed to wrangle him up, and here he is. Hi, Paul.
Oh, my reputation precedes me, and it's one I would like to have preceding me. So that's also unique and interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's face it, you are the movie expert to me. I mean, if I want to know anything about movies, I go to you. It's a treat. And even though we occasionally have our differences about which movies we like and which are good, we both know what's good when it comes to blockbusters, Indiana Jones. So we're fine with
Yeah, we just had a nice talk about that
that.
before we started recording.
We did. So let's talk about these two movies, and hopefully you'll be able to give us a bit of a lowdown, some background and stuff like that, and what you think about them. And we're going to talk about Amadeus first, a movie, a film adaptation of the Peter Shaffer play. I think it was 1979, if I recall correctly, and the movie was made in 1984. Starred F. Murray Abraham. He got an Oscar for Best Actor. Tom Hulce played Mozart. Quite an interesting movie in a lot of ways. So let's get your take on it first, and we'll see where we go.
Yeah, well, it is the 40th anniversary. You mentioned 84, so which is also hard to believe. Woof. 40 years since Amadeus came out. But nevertheless, the Motion Picture Academy has done a great thing and given us a 4K restoration of the film, and that's what's going to go out and start playing in theaters. So it hasn't looked or sounded this good in quite some time. And if you know the film, it's about Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, a genius welcomed into the King's Court in Vienna. We've never had like a long, as far as I know, a long biopic of Mozart. Like here he is as a kid, and here he is, and here he dies. And I kind of like that lately. It seems like the biopics can sometimes get a little overstuffed if you're not careful and cover too much. But this one, kind of like Selma or Steve Jobs, I like we don't have an MLK full story, but we got the Selma part of MLK. We didn't get a Steve Jobs movie, but we did have a Steve Jobs movie, but the better one is the one that just covers him at 3 different product launches. And I thought that was a very unique way to tell the story of Steve Jobs and see where he is in his life each time he launches some brand new amazing product. So with Mozart, we're only covering the time that he comes to the court in Vienna on through his death. And he immediately makes a jealous enemy of Antonio Salieri, the court composer. Salieri is, in his own words later in the film, perhaps mediocre. So that envy leads him to taking his frustration out on Mozart and his anger out on God, which was one of the more interesting parts of the film that I forgot all about, is that he's not just angry at Mozart, he's angry at God because he thought his talent came from God and that it would lead him to these amazing things. Then he sees this lunatic. Mozart is introduced immediately as like a childish buffoon goof, but incredibly musically gifted. So why would God put these gifts into this into this ne'er-do-well? So he gets angry, and the whole film actually starts with him in an asylum where he's shouting about having murdered Mozart, and he was attempting suicide. And so he ends up telling his whole life story to a priest, and that's the movie. Basically, we keep cutting back to him with this, big bandage around his neck where he's trying to cut his throat, and he talks about how Mozart was instrumental in sort of seeing his demise. Yet, this movie, I forgot, is really, really funny. Like and really, really accessible. Like I'm talking about a 17th century composers having, in the Austrian court. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's a lot of fun, but that is not the case. Don't let the powdered wigs and 17th century dress fool you. It's loose and fun, and the first hour and a half is just one funny moment after another. Maybe because I'm 40 years older from the last time I saw it, that it's playing funnier. Small little things. Even there's nothing better than watching somebody seethe in a movie. I don't know if you ever saw The Informant with Matt Damon, but Scott Bakula's character can't get anything done right, and he just see The Terminal with Tom Hanks, one of Steven Spielberg's lesser efforts, but it's about a guy traveling through an airport terminal, and his country undergoes some sort of issue where he can't leave the terminal, and all the guy who runs the terminal wants to do is get him out. Stanley
Right.
Tucci.
Stanley Tucci.
Can't get him out, and he's so frustrated, and it is hilariously fun to watch. And so it's really kind of fun, even though it's a horrible thing for Salieri to just be overwhelmed by this kind of self-hate and anger and envy. It's also pretty funny. But so have you've seen the play, Tom? You ever see it staged?
I have never, no, I can't. Nothing comes to mind. I've never seen the
Yeah.
play stage. I've seen the movie, but I have never seen the play stage. No.
I'm curious to see. I did go down to the Motion Picture Academy where they did the world premiere of this 4K print that's now going to go out, and digital print, obviously, that's going to go out and play. So yeah, it did look and sound amazing. But one thing the film does brilliantly, and I don't know if they do this on stage or not, is every time there's 3 or 4 times where the characters talk about music. He said, "Oh, the bassoons came in," and then you hear boom, 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 and then an oboe, like the audio sort of follows the discussion of the music as either Salieri remembers it or as Mozart is creating it. Even he's like, and then the voice is coming in, dun, 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 dun. And all that is a fascinating choice on how to tell these stories and how to have the music be a really important part of the film. And also seeing it in the big screen, this is going to be great for folks at the Opera House because, and this just happened with me and Maestro as well. Maestro came out on Netflix. It's a story of Leonard Bernstein, but that music overwhelming you in the theater does the magic that it did to Bernstein in real life. And when you see him conducting and he's overwhelmed by the music, you get it because you're also experiencing that. And so when you see this film and you see the music just overpowering you with, again, a revamped soundtrack, which took longer, I guess, to restore than it took to make the film, the original film. So so that's going to work wonders. So definitely get out and see this one in the theater. Won 8 Oscars. I'm not surprised. And one of the funniest Oscars was Maurice Jarre, I think his name is, or Maurice Jarre. I can't remember how to pronounce his name. He won the Oscar for A Passage to India. And I remember in his acceptance speech, he said, "I won because thankfully Mozart wasn't nominated." So wasn't exactly original music made for the film. So, and it was fun at the screening. Saul Zentz was the producer of this and many other great films like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He worked often with director Milos Foreman, who made both those films. Paul Zentz was there, who was his nephew, and he worked on the film. And he was talking about how they shot in communist Czechoslovakia at the time in Prague to represent Vienna. And and all sorts of crazy stories. All these movies have great stories, like how they had to go to Germany for fruits and vegetables because they didn't have a lot of fruits and vegetables in communist Czechoslovakia, and then they couldn't eat here they are, but don't eat them in front of the crew that's from Czech, or they'll be like, "Where'd you get the fruits and vegetables?" It'll be a whole thing. So like all these kind of things always go on behind the scenes, and next thing you know, we have a brilliant movie. So so it was a fun experience, definitely in the theater, and you're not going to be disappointed by this incredible movie. It's held up extremely well because although it made in '84, obviously it takes place in the 1700s. It won Oscars for the design, it won Oscars for the costumes. It looks and sounds great, whereas other movies from 1984, not so much. That took place in 1984, don't look so great, but this one looks fantastic. You're going to love it. And F. Murray Abraham is fantastic, chewing on the words, in his contempt for Mozart. And Tom Hulce shouldn't be overlooked either. He was great as Mozart and came up with that crazy laugh that he has. It's just annoying, and just further drives a stake into Salieri's heart, And look for a young Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City as the young spy Salieri sends to be a maid at Mozart's apartment and then leak information back to him. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. I'm going to ask you this really quick because I really feel I need to. We're talking about this movie as a film, not as an historical document, too, because the history is very, in this movie is not exactly accurate. It's pretty fictionalized.
Yeah, and one thing they did was they got a bunch of American actors, to do this. So they didn't even try and be like place accurate. They just said, "Look, we just want to have the fun we can tell with this story with Mozart, being entertaining as hell, and then but not worry about being dragged down in any sort of dialect and thick story or anything. That's what I mean by when I say the word accessible. Despite all of its I think part of the accessibility is just making it perhaps not historically accurate, streamlining it for a nice, it's still 2 hours and 40 minutes, but it's a nice, but it's still streamlined considering the story they could have told, and it could have got longer and trudgier. And I think they did a fine job in whittling it down to just the good stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, I've always loved the film and the job by F. Murray Abraham, to a character actor like me, that's just absolutely tremendous. I love watching Just that performance just rivets you. We need to talk about Joseph Boulogne, the Chevalier de Saint George, and I didn't really know much about him until I saw this film and that the Bach and Beyond Festival is going to be featuring one or two of his works. So what did you get out of the movie? What did you learn?
Oh,
How was the film?
they're
Hmm?
gonna play his stuff at
They're
the
going to play some
concert.
pieces of his stuff at the concert. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, this is fascinating because there's little known about him because he was the son of a French farmer and a slave. So he's a black man who's a mixed race who becomes remarkably the Chevalier de Saint George, as you said, a musician, violinist, and composer for the Queen of France. Like, first of all, that's a story right there. Like how he even ascends to that point. That there's a lot going on with this guy, and the movie covers a lot of it, but still not all of it, but still maybe too much of it. So come in and like take what you can, enjoy what you like. There's a lot going on with this guy, because also unlike Mozart, unlike Amadeus, I should say, we don't go back to his very childhood with Joseph. We we see him kind of being dumped off in his school where he's going to learn music, and his dad pretty much leaves him, said, hey, there you go, and they said, oh, you're going to just ditch your illegitimate son here, we'll see what we can do. And of course he becomes a brilliant musician. But I'd like to see that story too, like, oh, then they kind of cut to then he's working in the court. I'm like, oh, so this guy was incredibly brilliant. But all that is to say, you don't know a lot about him thanks to Napoleon,
Ah.
because his story, Joseph's story, led up to the French Revolution. After the French Revolution, Napoleon comes around and reinstitutes slavery. So, as you can imagine, no one was performing his works in France, and a lot of it was been lost to history. So the filmmakers and historians and all sorts of other people are kind of drudging up what stories they can and then filling in the gaps. So, which is kind of a shame because I mean, the music they play in the film is pretty incredible. So I imagine that's going to be a great concert. They what they do is interesting. A lot of times movies think that if the production takes place on foreign land, it's British. You've probably seen this, right? Like this takes place in France, they're speaking with a
Yes.
British dialect.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Because at one point, another character speaks in a language other than English, and Joseph says, well, could we speak French around here? And then she starts speaking English, which is saying to us, there's all speaking French, but they have to speak English for us to understand the movie, I guess. They
Yeah.
didn't want subtitles. So but when they speak the English, it's with a British dialect. So I don't know. That's just how the movies work. I mean, Troy, even right with the Brad Pitt, they're all British. I don't know. Foreign means British to Hollywood, so
Mm.
that's what's going on there. But yeah, it's Kelvin Harrison Jr. is good. I don't really know much about the guy. I think he's played a lot of supporting parts in other movies. I think he was BB King in the Elvis film that came out recently and some other parts. But most of the time when I don't hear about somebody, I assume they were a big deal on a TV show I never watched.
Okay.
I don't know about Kelvin Harrison Jr., but he's quite good in the lead part. And to bridge the two movies, which is great, the first scene in Chevalier is him taking on Mozart at one of Mozart's own concerts, stepping up with a violin, and then having like a duel, like a "you got served" moment in in the 1700s, where they're trying to one up each other with their violin solos, which is pretty amazing because you see Mozart's ego right on display that was left over from Amadeus, and now you see, oh, here comes this new guy's ego, and it's interesting because his ego is so huge and so driven. It's talking about Joseph,
Mhm.
his he's a little hard to like, but then of course you're seeing kind of his trajectory in the court, which will suffer from racism and the music challenges that he has, and you see the French Revolution coming at the same time, and eventually they're going to meet. So that's your storyline there. You got Minnie Driver in a small role. She's saddled with some cheesy dialogue, but it doesn't go on through the whole film. The rest of it is pretty good. Um, yeah, and I might have streamlined his production down to two or three big aspects of him, kind of like I said, Amadeus didn't cover his whole life or anything. Because again, there's a lot going on with Chevalier, and that makes for an interesting story. And I'm surprised this one wasn't recognized for costumes and production design and all that because it looks great.
Interesting. Yeah.
So definitely
I
a big screen experience, even though I saw it here on Hulu. Get out to the theater and check it out because it's big.
I'm sure it's going to be big, and that's the thing about these costume dramas, and especially the music, because if they've done the music right, if they've done the Chevalier's music right, and if they've done Mozart's music right, and even if they've done Salieri's music right, the doing the music right in these films is really part of the whole aesthetic in terms of if you're going to put on a Bach and Beyond festival, well, you better get films that do the music right.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I didn't know any more than you did about Ballone's music, but it's pretty impressive, especially the stuff towards the end. And I was also surprised from both of these films to see how much it was opera that they always got into. In fact, it's only once in Chevalier is it a concert.
Mhm.
He puts on a concert. The rest of the time, and all through Amadeus, it's like, we got a new opera. Yes, I got the Marriage of Figaro, or I got the Magic Flute, or whatever. So he's always got. And I always thought it was just like, you hear about dun, 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 dun. Like, now I'm thinking to myself, is that a concert piece or is that from an opera? Like,
Right.
operas were the big thing there. In fact, yeah, Bologna is fighting to be the head of the Paris Opera. It becomes an immediate challenge with another composer that they're going to fight to do this thing. And then it's, of course, he gets involved with a white woman who is the married to like one of the strong arm guys for the queen, and so that's a whole challenge. Again, a lot going on. So if you want a nice thick storyline, check out Chevalier. But again, as a double feature, this is fantastic. Whoever put this together, kudos.
All right, excellent. Listen, Paul, as always, I hate to cut you off because I mean I can always talk for hours with you, but thank you very much for, as always, coming on the podcast. I really appreciate your insight, and I know that the listeners are going to really appreciate the insight in the movies too, because going with that extra expertise that you bring in always makes a movie that much more interesting.
Oh, I got another half hour if you want to keep going on Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, because I could go on. No, thank you, Tom, for having me as always. Check out everything I'm up to at themovieguys.net.
TheMovieGuys.net. We'll have the link down at the bottom of the show notes for sure, as we always do. Thanks a lot, Paul. Appreciate it. Both Amadeus and Chevalier are available to stream via Netflix, Apple TV, or YouTube. The 4K version of Amadeus may be difficult to find since it was just released at the end of May, but you can't watch the director's cut of Amadeus on Amazon Prime Video. So make sure to check out both of these movies and see if movie guy Paul Preston was really on his toes. Now, I know the rest of my dates are correct, as the Bach and Beyond Festival does take the 1891 Fredonia Opera House stage on Friday, June 14th, Saturday, June 15th, and Sunday, June 16th for the very last time. I wanted to be sure to interview the two feature performers of this festival, emerging young artist Alexander Pegis and founding oboist Cheryl Bishkoff. Let's give a listen to Alex Pegis to begin with, who will be featured on the cello in Vivaldi's Concerto for Violoncello RV 424 during Saturday's concert. So I'm being joined now by Mr. Alexander Pegis, and Alex is going to be the emerging artist at the Bach and Beyond Festival coming up. He is scheduled to play the concerto, Vivaldi's Concerto for Violoncello, RV 424. So, Alex, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Now, you are the emerging artist, I believe. Grant Cooper started this program to get young people exposure, in the world of orchestral playing, and it's been a really very, very good program. Can you give me a little background about how you were chosen for this particular edition of the Bach and Beyond Festival?
Yeah, so I'm currently doing my master's degree at NEC. And when I was prepping my audition for that, I actually ended up playing one of Grant Cooper's solo cello works as part of my contemporary requirements for my audition. And so I played it for him, just to double check that it was, in line with what he wanted. And he liked what he heard a lot, and essentially offered if I wanted to play on his in Bach and Beyond, and it kind of spiraled into being one of the emerging young artists, which is really exciting because it's going to be lots of stuff to play.
Well, what are you most excited about? We'll talk about the Vivaldi first because I know that's
Mm.
kind of an interesting little concerto, and I'm sure you've been preparing it for the festival. What are you noticing about it?
Oh, it's kind of a treat for me. I feel like I spend a lot of my time doing late classical and beyond repertoire, and so I'm playing much more kind of, I guess, standard of what you would say concertos. Lots of big romantic things where uh, the orchestra is really supporting and acting as accompaniment to you, and you are the primary focus. And this Vivaldi is much more kind of concerto grosso, where I'm the cello part, and I have solo part, a solo part, but it's not the only thing that's going on. There's a much more kind of cohesive back and forth, at least the way that I feel it, and that makes it much more of a group activity in some ways. I'm very excited to kind of piece that together with everyone.
I did notice in doing some of my research and getting a listen to it that the cellist that I saw perform it, I was amazed by the finger dexterity on the along the
Mm,
strings. That seems to require a lot of dexterity to get up and down that scale to be, particularly the first and the third movement. The second movement, of course, is a
yeah.
little bit more andante. It's a little slower and so on, but it does require that kind of dexterity. Now, what do you do to get your fingers ready to do that kind of stuff?
Some of that is building on old skills. I'm playing cello for a long time at this point, so it's some of it is just continuing to develop these ideas and techniques that I've been working on, and some of it is also just being really focused on getting that control early and learning it. And that way, at this point, I'm not constantly like opening music and going, "Oh no, how do I play this?" It's more a question of getting it just as I want. So for a lot of that, it'll be maybe focusing on the like placement of each finger in very slow motion and then speeding that up until it's automatic and easy.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you say you've been playing a long time. When did you start? I know your
Yes,
father is a musician for sure. I've interviewed him on the program, so
yes. My mother is also a cellist,
ah.
and so I started when I was 4, which means that now I've been playing for because I'm 26, which means I've now been playing for 22 years, which is which is a horrible number to realize. It starts to make me feel quite old.
Yes, but still, you have to realize you've been playing through all of your childhood. So when you say something like
Yeah,
that, but you're only 26 years old, you're really, in a sense, in the world of music, only getting started.
yeah, that's really exciting. I've always thought that the kind of peak of everyone's playing, you arrive at that more or less at the 45, 50 years. Like if you continually practice and keep your skills up and prevent yourself from getting a major injury, when you're in like 45 or 50, you have all the technical ability, but so much more musical maturity than you do when you're younger. And I think that's so exciting to think of kind of this distant, like theoretical ability that I could come to, and that I will not suddenly stop growing. I think that's something that um, has always seemed kind of sad about some very competitive sports is that you spend all this time doing it, and then there is a cutoff at which point you will only get worse, and
That's
that
right.
must be frustrating because at least with music you can for a long time still do it at such a high level.
Yeah, that's a big plus. I know. That's a very, very good analogy too. Um, as you were growing up, learning how to play the cello, and both your parents are cellists, was there ever a time when you just like said, I don't want to do this anymore. I mean, this is like not fun. This is like, I'm sick of this, blah blah blah, and I want to do something else.
A couple times. Mostly it was like for a day or a week. I mean, when you're like, even when you enjoy something when you're a kid, sometimes you get frustrated by it. Um, but it was always something I really enjoyed. When I was around like 12 or 13, that's kind of when I was like, maybe I want to do this when I'm older as a job. Um, and that's never really gone away. I still love picking up the instrument every day, and I love performing. So um, it just always kind of, no matter how frustrated I got or how bored maybe I felt, it was always kind of like, well, it's kind of worth it. Like, because the long term benefits have always superseded the short term.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good thinking. There's I know that classical music per se, you grew up with it obviously, but
Mm.
most young people don't. Um, what do you say to people your age or a little bit younger when you were growing up, because you were so immersed in this, Western classical music tradition, and how do you explain that to them when most people don't get immersed or even exposed to it in the same way you did?
That that's a really good question. I'm still trying to figure that out. Um, when I was younger, I had a little bit of a superiority complex about it, and so I'd be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's just better." But that's like not really true, and also not helpful. Even if it was true, it's yeah. Nobody wants to hear that they're actually wrong about what they like.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know. It's really difficult. I think part of it for me now is that a lot of classical music allows you to tap into ideas and emotions that other music just doesn't have the capability of covering. It's not that it is worse per se, but like uh, the contemporary pop band is going to be focused on completely different subject matter than a only instrumental piece that you have to interpret yourself. And I think there's a freedom of expression in that that I think is really powerful. I think a lot of people when they first go to a concert, they kind of go, "Oh wow, this is different.
Hmm.
It's much more visceral." And I think especially the in person part.
Yeah.
I don't think recordings ever fully capture what it's like being in a live performance.
No, no, I
I think
have to
it's
agree with
always
you. When
it's
I was
always more powerful.
It's always more powerful. And I was fortunate to grow up at a time where field trips, we took field trips. I grew up in the New York metropolitan area and we take field trips and
Ooh.
we would go to Avery Fisher Hall and see Leonard Bernstein literally do young people concerts on the podium. And I remember going to that and going, this is like, your mind gets blown. Your little mind just kind of goes nuts.
Yeah.
And Bernstein actually had quite a rapport with young people. At
He
least he.
was he was incredible at that. His outreach stuff was so well put together, and he was so charismatic on stage. It made it really, that must have been amazing to go to as a
Oh,
kid.
he was so into it. When he was up on the podium, you could tell the music was overwhelming him and he was so into it and his whole body was just like there, it made a great impression. Whether I understood the music or anything like that really didn't matter, but the man
Yeah.
himself who was conducting was like, that's something else. I think that's where I probably got, my first appreciation of classical music. Are there any I'm going to guess there might be one, but are there any classical musicians today that you really look up to and admire as sort of like people you'd like to emulate?
Oh, one of them is the violinist Augustin Hadlick. I really adore his playing, and I got the chance to meet him a couple years ago and talk to him for a bit, and that was really special. He's a extremely kind individual, but he also just, his playing is so beautiful, kind of willing to be beautiful at the expense of all else, and I think that's really, there's something special about that, about his integrity while also keeping a kind of holistic showmanship almost. I don't know. It's difficult to explain, but there's something very compelling about him, about his playing to me. And I think that is something to, that kind of love of it, and that kind of communicative ability is really that special.
I of course was thinking of Yo-Yo Ma. If you think of the cellist,
Mm.
you automatically think of Yo-Yo Ma. And he was actually here at Fredonia. He visited the college once, and I got to see him live and perform. And but watching him interact with the students was the same way. Now, like because as you say, you're getting your master's now, but the way he interacted with students, he was charming. He was funny. He was completely uh you un I get the best way I could put it is unstuffy. I never saw a musician who had that kind of reputation, who was so down to earth and human with the students.
He's special. Um, I don't know. He's just been like the most genuine guy for his entire career, and then on top of that, he's this like towering ability on the instrument. He almost not gets overlooked, but he almost gets like cellist snobby, like, oh, but there's so many other people, just because he's like he's almost like a pillar of the world of the classical music world, where it's like, yeah, of course he sounds like that. He's Yo-Yo Ma, and
Yes.
we almost forget sometimes, and then you hear him live, and you go, oh my god,
Mm.
that the sound is just so it's like this effortless ability, and then this huge pure sound that just kind of uh catapults you into having to listen. It's so exciting.
Yeah, and it has to be doubly exciting for someone like you, because it's one thing to listen to that, like me, to listen to Yo-Yo Michael. God, that is beautiful. But someone like you who's been playing for 20 years, and then to watch him play and listen to that sound, it's got to be just doubly exciting, because of you
Yeah.
can get right into the technique and the interpretation and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't do everything he does, but I know oftentimes how he's doing stuff, and and but I can tell the kind of level and the polish of all the things he's doing, and ignoring the technical side, also, it's just really beautiful, and the way that he works his way through phrases is really exciting. And so, I mean, here I hearing him live is quite an event.
Yeah, it
He
was
came
quite an
I wasn't able to come to it, but he came to Boston this year and played both Shostakovich cello concertos in one concert.
You must have been really, really busy to miss that.
I was, yeah.
So tell me, Alec, before I let you go, what are you looking forward towards, in the future? You're going to be coming. We're very excited to have you come and play at Fredonia, but you finished off school and you're starting to. What are you looking forward to in the future? Do you ever see a time when you might like stop playing the cello for conducting or anything along those lines? I'm not putting thoughts in your head here, but
uh, yeah, conducting is tricky. I've thought about it in the past, and I've taken a couple conducting courses. I, it's a, I think it's a maybe coming from a instrumental background. It's so different because I'm used to having kind of more or less control over what's happening, over
Mhm.
when the sound comes out, how the sound comes out, and as a conductor, at least when you're not very good, as I am, you have to be willing to uh, let the sound come out as it does, and it even if you don't like what comes out, at some point it is also because of how you are conducting, and that's such a different feeling. I don't know if I'd ever be willing to give up that level of detail. Maybe when I'm older and relaxed, but I don't know. I'm excited for playing the next couple of years. I think there's going to be some hopefully exciting concerts, and I'm hoping to put together a big recital this upcoming year for my master's degree. That'll
Good.
be fun. Um, nothing in particular. I mean, it's so hard to predict what the future is going to be.
Well,
But
interestingly enough, I'll ask you this question. What are the challenges to having a career in the classical music world? Let's look at it that way. What challenges will you be facing, you think?
that I mean, one of them is obviously it's a tiny pond and there are a lot of fish.
Mm.
I mean, the level is really extraordinarily high right now. Um, and that does mean that there are a lot of challenges, especially if you want to go for a more orchestral position. Uh, the sometimes you have an audition opening and 200, 300 people have applied for it, and that's one seat, and that can be really tricky. I mean, depending on what kind of playing you want to do as your career. There are totally different challenges. If you want to be a soloist, it's really tricky because you have to. It's not just about your ability. You have to get this extraordinary ability as a player, but then there's also all the things like marketability or just is an audience excited that you're coming to town? And some of that can be developed over time, but some of that is also just kind of it happens kind of naturally. Audiences respond well and critics like it. And so the big challenges I think are always kind of being at the right place at the right time, because you can only do so much to prepare. So if you prepare as well as you can, you have to just then show up and do all that you are able to, and then hope that that's it enough for the day. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
Listen, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate that, and I know the audiences will be looking forward to coming to hear you play on Saturday night with your solo for that Vivaldi piece, and then for the rest of the festival. So good luck with it all.
Of course. Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to get to talk to you for a bit.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much, Alex. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Tickets for these final performances of the Bach and Beyond Festival events on June 14th through 16th continue to be on sale online at www.fredopera.org/tickets or at the box office at 716-679-1891. Individual tickets for each night are $20 for adults and $10 for students, or you can buy a subscription ticket for all 3 nights for $51, a savings of $9. There's only one item for this week's arts calendar, and that's Main Street Studios' production of the Kander and Ebb musical Cabaret. The show will be presented on June 14th through 15th and again June 20th, 21st, and 22nd. For more information, show times, and to purchase tickets, go to their website at www.mainstreetstudios.org, where you can also find information about their production of Shakespeare's Macbeth at the end of July, as well as their upcoming Playground summer theater camps. And remember, if you have an arts event that you'd like to get on the arts calendar, just call 716-679-1891 with your information, or email to operahouse@fredopera.org, and we'll be glad to include your event. Please give us a month's advance notice to ensure a timely mention. Also, if you are holding an arts event that I am unaware of, please feel free to write a comment on the episode's homepage at aisleseat.podbean.com and share your information. Shameless self-promotion when it comes to the arts is always welcome. Lastly, we have an interview with founding oboist Cheryl Bishkoff. Cheryl has played in all 27 renditions of the Bach and Beyond Festival, and she will be featured as part of the world premiere of Byron Adams' Serenata in Stile Antico, to be performed during Saturday night's concert. She takes some time here to reminisce about the festival and offer her thoughts about the direction of classical music in general. I'm really honored to have for the second year in a row Ms. Cheryl Bishkoff. Cheryl is the founding oboist for the Bach and Beyond Festival. She is here with me again. She will be playing in her 27th and final rendition of the Bach and Beyond Festival. So welcome, Cheryl.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think let's get the big elephant out of the room right away, and we'll deal with this. This is the 27th one. This is the last one you played. You'll be played all 27 of them, and you must have some reflections, some emotions, some feelings, some thoughts about the end of the festival. And so, can we start with sharing a little bit of those kinds of things with the listeners?
Okay, so the first thing I really should say is that there must be somebody out there with a lot of money who could give us money to keep this going. This is so bittersweet for me. This has been what I do in June. This has been the week that I schedule everything else around. This has been a precious opportunity for me. The oboe was the queen of instruments in the Baroque period. And of course, we have been Bach and beyond, and sometimes way beyond. But the oboe is always featured and prominent, and the music is such a delight to play. There's just no better music for an oboist to play than Bach. So it's very bittersweet. It has been a fabulous run. It has been precious to me, as I said, what I plan my summer around.
Hmm. And can you perhaps pick out, I know it's going to be very difficult. I mean, if I were in your position, it would be difficult for me to pick out like one or two moments in the festival that you just will, keep with you for eternity. We go that far.
Yeah, yeah. For me, I get and I'm repeating myself here, but if I think to the pieces that I've played that have been the most meaningful to me, they would all be by Bach. I did the big G minor sonata one year. Certainly the cantatas that we did with Janet were a big high point for me. And the Bach double, which I've gotten to do at least twice with different violinists. So for me, the real gems for me have been the Bach playing.
Mm. And now you're going to be playing, obviously, some Bach, but let's talk first about Byron Adams' piece, if we may, the Serenata in Stile Antico. That will be a world premiere that he has written, and he's featuring the oboe, so that's going to be a feature performance for you. I talked to him in the last episode of the podcast,
Oh,
and
great.
yeah, yeah, and I got an opportunity to talk to him about this piece, and he talks about it as the oboe being featured and intertwined and so on and so forth. But he also mentioned he still had the finale to finish, so I don't know if you've got it already yet. What do you?
So I want you and all of your lovely listeners to know I received the part on Thursday, the finished part.
Okay.
I immediately sat down and played through it, and of course I've been working on it. So I'm still getting the flavor of it.
Mm-hmm.
I like it very much. From what I can tell from the oboe part, it's a little bit along the lines of the Respighi Ancient Airs and Dances.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got themes from the 17th, 18th century, but it's in Byron's unique voice.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, indeed, the oboe is featured along with, I believe, some string soloists and the whole string ensemble.
Yes, that's correct.
Which is, as we all know, it's a really lovely sound for the oboe. The strings and the oboe that's a great combination.
Yeah, he described it as the oboe sort of, carrying the melodic tonalities of the piece. I think, if I recall correctly, particularly in the third movement, there's some really beautiful passages there for the
Yes,
oboe that.
it's a Siciliano style, and yeah, I can't wait to hear it all together. It's I I think it's going to be definitely a highlight of this last set of concerts.
What does it mean to you as an oboist in a piece like this that is a world premiere? You're getting to play it the first time and all that kind of stuff. As a musician, as an oboist, what does it mean to be able to premiere a piece by Byron Adams?
It's a great honor. I met Byron at least I'm going to say 30 years ago, give or take, when he came to Fredonia to have a piece of his played with what was then called the Fredonia Chamber Players. It's now Winneco, I believe.
That's correct. Yes.
Um, so this is when Grant was conducting, and I found Byron to be absolutely charming and fun to be with, and I loved his music. So the fact that he's written this piece, he probably doesn't remember me from it, and that's not important. But he's written this piece that features the oboe, and I hope to play it in a way that makes him happy. And I think that he is not only a fine composer, but he is also a renowned musicologist and historian. So that's a deep well to draw from.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Um, some of the other pieces that you're going to be playing, can you give me? I don't need you to give me like a big rundown of every single piece, but the ones that you're looking forward to playing. I'm not exactly sure what I look at since I'm not a music expert. I don't know which ones have an oboe and which ones don't. So, you must be playing a couple of other pieces. So, can you give me a little
So
highlight of that?
I'm playing some pieces on each of the concerts, but they are all what we would consider, even in our tiny ensemble, orchestral pieces. So I'm playing the last piece on the first concert, which is a suite of, uh, I believe, three movements. And then I think there are orchestral pieces on each concert, ending, sadly, with the Haydn Farewell Symphony. We literally just leave the stage. And
Yes.
I think that's going to be a really, really hard moment for me. And
Yeah.
of course, when it was done originally, all that was kind of left were the candles. And I think that they blew out their candles as they left, or we turn out our lights as we leave the stage. And what's left is a dark stage. Yeah, I'm sure Grant has his ideas about this that we don't know yet, and we'll enjoy working on that.
Yes, and knowing Grant, I mean, he always has a trick or two up his sleeve in terms of, what he wants to say or how he introduces pieces. He's really a showman when it comes to that. I really enjoy that
Well,
part of it.
and which is
Yeah.
great because that's part of the performance aspect. I mean, it's one thing to listen to that Haydn symphony on a recording, but you miss the entire je ne sais quoi of the last movement, the actual farewell.
Actually, I'm looking at when I look at the program, one of the things that, of course, strikes me as very, very interesting, the way that Grant has put the program together, is the intertwining of the relationship between Mozart, Salieri, and Joseph Bologna, the Chevalier de Saint Georges. Those three are so intertwined in terms of little bits of rivalry and stories and so on and so forth. Is that an interesting part of the program for you?
Well, I think it might be, and I think it's going to give listeners a chance to make their own choices and comparisons. The we've just recently kind of discovered that last composer that you mentioned.
Hmm.
And he, more and more of his works are coming to light. And I've already played 2 of his symphonies, and they're quite charming
Hmm.
and could easily be, in my opinion, almost Mozart.
Yeah, a lot of people have said that. In fact, when I talked to Dr. Adams and was listening to him from the musicology side of his,
Exactly.
he really gave a lot of insights about that. And one of the things that he mentioned was just the simple fact that, like a lot of music of that period, it kind of got wiped out because of the French Revolution and then, Napoleon coming in. And so musicians like Bologna and a couple of others, their music just disappeared. So when you
Yeah.
say we're rediscovering it now, it's only because of the fact that, we had not known that they even existed, and now they're coming to light.
And I think we're also far more aware right now that history includes more than dead white men or living white men. We have, thank goodness, kind of dedicated ourselves a little bit in this past 10 years to recognizing the excellence of women and our Black ancestors. And so to play this music, it shouldn't be new to us, but it is.
But yes.
All of a sudden we're all playing Florence Price symphonies. We should have been playing them all along. And the Bologna symphonies that I've played are charming, and it's something that we could easily have been playing for years.
Well, we see it everywhere in classical music. And actually, I was going to sort of ask your opinion about that. When you take a look at what you see going on in classical music today, as someone who plays with the Rhode Island Philharmonic, for example, what do you see as the trends here relative to that? Is that going to continue? And how is that impacting audience attendance?
I honestly don't believe it has changed attendance at all. For musicians, it's given us an opportunity to discover a lot of new music that we have not played in the past. But I can speak for the Rhode Island Philharmonic and say that they have made an extraordinary effort to play music of people that have been completely underrepresented in the past.
Mhm.
If you want my personal opinion, I sometimes feel that that the pendulum has swung a little too far to that left side. And some of the music we're playing, I want to play high quality music from every generation of every genre, but I don't want to play a music just because it was composed by a woman
Mhm.
or composed by a person of other ethnicity than white.
Mhm.
So I want to play great music, and I want to be I want to learn this music. And for instance, last month we played the Wynton Marsalis violin concerto.
Mhm.
A whole new experience, an entirely different way of composing a concerto. Some of us hated it, some of us loved it, but it was something we should all know about and have played in our lives. The same with the Florence Price symphonies. We need to play those pieces. Uh, they shouldn't replace other pieces. We should be adding to our repertoire.
You expressed the concern relative to whether we're getting audiences, because it's like mostly Mozart in New York is closing, Bach and Beyond is closing. So there seems to be these two things going on where we're playing more music from composers we should be playing that we've neglected for so many years, but at the same time, some of these institutions are not able to sustain themselves, and that's a tough nut to crack, I think, Cheryl.
Yeah, and I think it's dangerous because without our gold standards, and Bach and Mozart are certainly our gold standards I don't care when you lived. Without that representation, I think we lose a frame of reference. You can't have a theater season and forget that Shakespeare is the gold standard.
Cheryl, I know it's going to be hard for you to come for the last time and see all, all of the friends that you've made at Fredonia and all of that.
Oh, yes, yes. It's going to be a week of making the rounds to visit a lot of very precious friends.
Yes. Well, I wish you the best with that. I hope it doesn't overwhelm you too much so that it affects your playing, because you've got some really nice pieces to play. And we'll look
Thank you.
forward to seeing you on the stage with your magnificent oboe playing. So thank you for joining me. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Tom. Thank you.
If you're any kind of fan of classical Baroque music, you're not going to want to miss this 27th and final edition of the Bach and Beyond Festival. With world premiere compositions by founding music director Maestro Grant Cooper and noted composer and musicologist Byron Adams, along with performances by emerging young artist Alex Pegis and founding oboist Cheryl Bishkoff, this farewell edition of the Bach and Beyond Festival is sure to be one of the best ever. So don't forget to get your tickets for this final edition of the festival soon. And that's it for this Bach and Beyond 2024 Part 2 edition of Notes from the Aisle Seat. My thanks to movie guy Paul Preston, Alex Pegis, and Cheryl Bishkoff for being my guests on this episode. Notes from the Aisle Seat is a production of the 1891 Fredonia Opera House in Fredonia, New York. For more information on any of the Opera House's events, call the box office at 716-679-1891, visit the website at www.fredopera.org, or email at operahouse@fredopera.org. Notes from the Aisle Seat is now available wherever you get your podcasts, and also on the Opera House YouTube channel. If you like this podcast, please consider following us by clicking the follow button on our home website at aisleseat.podbean.com and spreading the word through your social media feeds. If you have an arts event you'd like featured on the podcast, why don't you drop us a line at operahouse@fredopera.org, and we'll see about featuring your event. Please try to give us a month's advance notice if possible to facilitate timely scheduling. If you have any suggestions, comments, or criticisms of the podcast, just drop us a line at operahouse@fredopera.org. We'll be glad to receive your feedback. Our next and final episode of Season 3 will be available 1 week earlier than usual on Wednesday, June 19th, 2024. So please take note of that earlier date, Wednesday, June 19th, 2024, for the final episode of Season 3. I'm Tom Laughlin, and until then, be safe out there, and be kind to one another.